We will try to understand about Argo CD. Argo CD is a continuous delivery tool that is used in Kubernetes for application deployment to sync the changes from the target Git repository. Apart from like Argo CD, what it is now, why we use Argo CD is because it provides us the version control. We can roll back by reverting the commit whenever there is issues in the production after the deployment or during the deployment. And also this gives an automated sync because it is comparing the Git repository with the cluster current configuration. And if there is a drift, it will detect that drift and automatically heals the change if it is done without committing. Apart from this, like why we use Argo CD, there is the architecture which works inside the Argo CD. Inside Argo CD, because it compares the Git repository that we configure in the Argo CD. So it has one of the component that we called repo server. This component actually stores the templates which it renders to compare the target environment and like the target, I would say, configuration to the current configuration, like running in the cluster. And there is this acts like an engine because it is storing the configuration which it refers for comparison to detect the drift. Apart from this, it has the controller that is like a, I would say, the brain, because controller is actually doing the work of comparison, and it continuously watch and compare the changes, and if there is a change it will shows out of sync. Apart from this, there is also one of the component in Argo CD that is workflow server. So that is used when we configure, when we define in the configuration file that we want pre-hook or post-hook, I would say, steps before for the deployment purpose. And how we can define it is like, because before starting the deployment, we need to communicate to the stakeholders or to the internal teams that we are starting the deployment. So if there is any alert comes up, then they are aware, okay, we are running the deployment. So there are some patterns which I would say triggers when we run the deployment. And once the deployment succeeded, then we inform the stakeholders or the internal teams that we have successfully completed the deployment. And if it is failed, then we also communicate that the deployment has been failed. So that team is aware about the deployment process and they act accordingly on the alerts. Like we have the alerting system in process, which is monitoring the performance of the applications. Apart from this architecture, there is like the features which Argo CD provides. Argo CD, um, when it combines with Argo rollout, it gives strategies to handle the deployment. If we want gradual shift, we can go with canary deployment, or if we want instant switch, we can go with blue-green deployment or progressive rollouts. So these are the strategies which we follow with the help of Argo rollout. And apart from it feature how it works so that we have understood that it continuously watch the configuration drift, and the configuration part is handled with the help of customize tool or with the help of Helm, because it is rendering the template, and those templates which are being rendered, they needs to be compared with the running configuration in the cluster to the target which is defined in the Git repository. And apart from this, it also gives the feature of SSO integration, because in enterprise, we aware that we at any time we need to onboard or offboard the team members. So there should be one place to enable or disable the access of the user so that we can control with SSO. And like if we are using, that depends what identity we are using. If we are using Microsoft Intra ID, or we are using on-prem Active Directory, or we are using maybe the AWS Identity Center. So it depends, and accordingly, it supports the protocols for all the platforms, and this is how it actually manage the SSO. Apart from this SSO integration, it like this is like prior to Argo CD tool, we were managing the deployment, that is with, I would say, by creating the CD pipeline. If it is in Azure, it is like we were using Azure pipeline, or if it is in I would say in Jenkins also, we were using Jenkins pipeline for CD, or GitHub Actions pipeline for CD, or so these are the tools that we were using prior to Argo CD. It is based on the push mechanism, like we were pushing the changes to the cluster to apply the deployment, and there was no version controlled. What we are getting here in the Argo CD, and that sync, I would say, feature, and it was working on push based, wherein we have to also the credential, the kube config, that is that we need to manage, because we need to log into the cluster, and we were using kubectl to apply the changes in the running cluster. So this was not as effective as we when we got introduced to Argo CD. It is working on pull mechanism, because with the help of webhook, it is it is sending an event to the Argo CD that there is a change, and then Argo CD is pulling the changes from the Git, and it is automatically healing the cluster, or I would say doing the rolling update to the cluster based on the strategy we follow with the Argo CD, because Argo CD is to do the advanced deployment uh, onto the clusters. So this is all about Argo CD, and like what is Argo CD, why we use Argo CD, what is the architecture, how it works, and what are the features. So this is all about Argo CD. Okay, so we will try to understand about Argo CD. What is Argo CD? Argo CD is a declarative GitOps continuous delivery tool for Kubernetes. What I mean by this is Argo CD configuration we define in the YAML file. We just need to say we need three replica count, and it will create three replica count. We need not to define imperatively the detail of, each step to execute. And GitOps means Git is the single source of truth. That means if there is any pull request who's been merged to that particular repository, then it will trigger an event by webhook to the Git Argo CD component, and then it will have some sync hook which will sync the changes that could be manual or automatic, and it will show us if it is out of sync, if there is a mismatch, or it is in sync. So this is how the continuously it is delivering. So this is an automated process, and this Argo CD is particularly designed for Kubernetes. Why Argo CD? Now we have understood what is Argo CD. So Argo CD is a continuous delivery tool for the Kubernetes. Now why Argo CD? Application definitions, configurations, and environments should be declarative and version controlled. What it means? So Argo CD deploys the application or the workload on the Kubernetes, and this is a tool. So for this tool to work, we need to define the configuration, and the configurations which we define that needs to be managed. So the configuration we can manage by Helm charts. We just need to create Helm chart, or if there is any changes, then we just need to upgrade, like Helm upgrade. So this is the way how we manage the configuration. And there is one more tool that is Kubernetes native, that is customized. So we can use customize also, so that the base file uh, are placed in a common place, and only the environment is specific values file is being updated, and in the environments are recreated with easy way. Should be declarative, like we are defining that I need this state, and this is the job of the Argo CD to make this happen. And the version control, so we are merging the change by creating a pull request to the repository, so that every version is being maintained in the Git history. If we want to go back to any particular version, we just need to do the git revert, and our state would be recreated at that point in time. So it is auditable, and we can do the auditing, like who did what changes, and we can go through the pull request. Application deployment and life cycle management should be automated, auditable, and easy to understand. What does this mean? Is the application deployment, because on the Kubernetes we do the application deployment. So when we are doing this application deployment, we need to manage the life cycle, right? We need to do the rollback if there is a state which we don't want, so we can roll back, or we can do the rolling updates if we want to make some update in the current state. So it should be automated. So this is It is continuously comparing the Git, the target, and the cluster, the live environment. So this is automated. There is no human intervention. It is taken care by this Argo CD tool. It is auditable, like we can see the version history, and it is easy to understand because we are writing or defining the configuration in the YAML file. So this is like why we are using Argo CD, because it is version controlled and it is managing the life cycle of the application development in an automated way. Now, this is why we use Argo CD. Now, this is a simple example, like we just created a namespace and then we have applied a particular manifest file to create Argo CD. And Argo CD is a tool of Argo Proj. And now, what is Argo CD we have understood? Why we use Argo CD, that we have understood. Now, how it works. Argo CD follows the GitOps pattern of using Git repositories as the source of truth. So this is following a GitOps pattern. Like if there is any pull request created and it is merged to that particular repository, then it will follow the pattern, like what was the state in the repo server. Repo server is one of the component of Argo CD. So that is a kind of engine to the Argo CD, which keeps the state of Git repository. What is the live state of cluster? So that is being maintained in the Git server. And there is one controller in the Argo CD whose job is to compare the Git server state and the Git, the target, that is the Git desired state. If they are matching, then it would be in sync. If there is any mismatch, then it will shows as out of sync. So either we can do the conciliation with by enabling auto healing, or we can manually also sync the changes. So this is how it works. And the configuration that we manage is by customize application. Customize, like, is Kubernetes one of the configuration management a tool that we use to manage the manifest file in a a better way. Helm chart, if there are Helm chart for almost every tool, so it is just we need to upgrade the Helm chart, and or we just need to create the Helm chart so that it is the versions, other revisions are being maintained, and it is easy to manage the configuration of our um, workload, that could be Argo CD or any. Argo CD automates the deployment of desired application state in the specific target environment. So here we target the particular environment, that is the prod environment or the non-prod environment, and it is like multi, I would say multi. environments we can manage, or multi-cluster or multi-region. So that could be managed by single place, that is Argo CD. So we can visualize what is happening, what is the progress of the deployment. Like we can do with CLI also, but CLI approach we use when we want to automate something. And if we just want to have a view, so it is easy to go with UI approach. Application deployments can track updates to branches, tags, or be pinned to a specific version of manifest at a git commit. So this is like when we are doing the application deployment, so we are tracking the updates, and how we are tracking updates is by pinning the specific version of the manifest at the git commit. Like when there is a pull request created, and and that is being merged to the repository. So there is a specific version we are maintaining. So this is how we are tracking the changes. So this is like how we are managing the version control of the application deployment. And now we have understood what is Argo CD, why we use Argo CD, how it works. Now comes the architecture part. To understand the architecture of the Argo CD, so developer will create a pull request and merge the change to the Git repository. And in the Git, we have configured a webhook so that if there is any event, means there is any commit in the Git, then it will inform the Argo CD component. And how it will inform? It will go to the API server, then API server will communicate to the application controller, and then application controller will talk to repository server, and then repository server will see there is a mismatch, right? So it will show out of sync in the Argo CD UI about the status of the deployment. Deployment because we are pushing an update to the running cluster. Now the work of the Kubernetes is it will deploy to different environment, or different cluster, or it could be different region. So it will do. Or we can create an action that Argo CD will ask for an approval if we want to deploy these changes to the Argo CD, like to the cluster or not. So Argo CD will bridge this gap, and it will auto heal by seeing the out of sync if we want automatic healing, or if we want we can also manually sync the changes. Argo CD is implemented as a Kubernetes controller. What I mean by this Kubernetes controller, so controller is the Kubernetes understand the uh, I would say the objects by custom resource definitions. So that is like through CRD, the Kubernetes controller. Argo CD is implemented as Kubernetes controller, which continuously monitors running application and compares the current live state against the desired target state as specified in the Git repo. So the Git is a single source of truth. So in the Git, we define what is the target that we want to achieve. And this is the work of the Kubernetes controller because it is implemented as a Kubernetes controller to compare the state and sync the changes. A deployed application whose live state deviates from the target state is considered out of sync. So if there is any deviation, there is any change in the state, then it will considered as out of sync. Argo CD reports and visualizes the differences. So when Argo CD sees there is a deviation between the state, so it's considered as out of sync and it reports. Reports means it will visualize the difference in the UI while providing facilities to automatically or manually sync the live state back to the desired target state. So it will automatically or manually sync the live state back to the desired target state. Live and the target state would be synced automatically. So this is how it is creating an impact or providing the facility to do this sync. Any modifications made to the target state is in the Git repo can be automatically applied. Any modification made to the desired target state in the Git repo can be automatically applied and reflected in the specified target environment. So in the specific target environment, it can be reflected. The changes can be reflected by showing out of sync, like there is a drift in the state. So this is how it is, how the architecture of the Argo CD is is and how the components are communicating with each other. And now we have to understand the features of the Argo CD. Automated deployment of the application that we have understand if we want to achieve a specific target environment. So the deployment of the application is automated. We just need to commit the change in the repository that we have registered for the Argo CD. Support for multiple config management or templating tools. Configuration is a template, right? Like we have launched template. So that is the kind of configuration we have. Similarly, it is for the Kubernetes. For the workload, we define the configuration. So those configuration needs a proper templating so that we can manage by the customized application or by Helm chart or maybe by the plain YAML. That is up to us, but there is a support for the configuration management. Ability to manage and deploy multiple cluster. So in the Argo CD, it's not only the single cluster we can manage, it is like multi-cluster we can manage through Argo CD because that could be one case that in a single cluster we are managing the multi environment or maybe we are using multiple clusters for the multiple environments or maybe we are using multiple reasons for our environment. So that depends either we are using single cluster or we are using multiple cluster or we are specific to the single region or we are deploying application to the multiple regions. It depends on project to project what is their requirement. Because in some project, let's say we have like uh, US, not US, I would say EU North or EU, um, like there is North or South regions. We wanted to have our target, that could be for the disaster recovery. We are preferring the another region, or for our primary, um, I would say, workload, we are considering a different region. This is how there is a multiple region concept. Apart from this, it also gives the feature of SSO integration. And OIDC is basically an identity that is used for workloads that are outside. Let's say we want Git to communicate to AWS, then it will use OAuth2, OAuth2 protocol for authentication, and it also use LDAP. Let's say we are managing the identities, the authentication and authorization through on-prem Active Directory, we can use LDAP protocol. And if not, we are using on-prem, then we can use the cloud, um, that use the SAML 2.0 protocol for authentication and authorization. So this is how it is talking to the different services in the in the in this space. That could be like Git is talking to AWS, or maybe Git is talking to Argo CD. So that is taken care by this integration. So the user need not to um, maintain the different credentials for authentication and authorization. So there is a single sign-on integration. Because in the organization, this is the way we follow multi-tenancy and RBAC policies for authorization. So we understood that for authorization, we need the policies, that is on resource-based access control, because not every member of the team would require the admin access. Let's say if there is an intern data scientist, or the developer who needs to see what is happening in the application deployment. So we have the view access, he'll be having the information, and he's aware if there is some alerts is triggering, then he's aware, okay, this is due to the deployment. But do the he cannot update anything in the team member would not be able to update anything. Only the right person who is responsible for the syncing, that could be senior DevOps. The senior DevOps would be having an access to sync the changes. And so there are multiple environment, or multiple cluster, or multiple regions where we have the deployment ongoing. So in the Argo CD, we have config map where we define the policies, rollback, roll anywhere to any application configuration committed in the Git repository. So the application configurations are committed in the Git repo. This is from where we are managing wherein we are managing the history. So this is at any point in time based on the performance or the metric or the logs. If we come across that deployment isn't going well, we can roll back. If it is creating noise in the production environment, if it is creating noise during the deployment, then we can roll back. Health status analysis of the application resources. So the application resources, like the application which is being deployed, it is underneath it is utilizing resources. So if the health status is not good, then we can roll back. Automated configuration, drift detection, and visualization. So that is, be aware that if there is a drift in the configuration, so it is being visualized, is being reported in the Argo CD. Automated or manual syncing of application to the desired state. And also, it is after it is detecting, it is also doing healing. So that would be manual, that we are going and clicking on sync, or it can be automatic also. Like we can enable the automatic heal. Web UI, which provides real-time view of the application activity. So what is happening in the application, that is can be monitored by the web UI. And the CLI we use for the automation or CI integration. What I mean by this is we are creating continuous integration. We are using continuous integration tools like GitHub Actions or Jenkins or GitLab or Azure pipelines to continuously integrate the source code by compiling and doing some security checks and creating an artifact that is like that can be used in any environment. So that is a packaged artifact. It will be used anywhere, either in Kubernetes, on EC2, or on like any server, on low on-prem or on cloud. And this is we'll be using like Argo CD login, then Argo CD apply that particular manifest. So this is how it will automatically do the integration, or like once the artifact is created and it is stored, artifact is created and stored in the registry, then it will update the manifest file for the repository, for the Argo CD repository, and then it will do the login and apply the changes in the cluster. A webhook integration. So there is a webhook integration because the events needs to be sent to the Argo CD that there is a change that we can do with the webhook. So that could be GitHub or GitLab. We can configure the webhook for the Argo CD to notify if there is a change. Access token for automation. So for the automation, we are managing the access token. What I mean by this access token is when we integrate SSO, single sign on, because we don't want to create a, a separate, because that's how we do the seamless integration, seamless authentication authorization that can be auditable, like who does what. And there is a pre-sync, sync, post-sync hooks. Hooks is um, to support complex application rollouts. So we do application rollouts. The rolling upgrade we are doing, it is by the deployment object we can do. But for blue, green, or canary upgrades, we use rollout, like the Argo rollouts we do. And in the Argo rollout, we also have a workflow server that is one of the component that is actually maintaining the graph for the steps that is being executed. Let's say first it needs to send the communication to the team that we are running a deployment, and then it starts a deployment because it needs to be communicated to the stakeholders, to the internal or to the vendors that we are doing the deployment. And once the deployment is succeeded, then we should send in communication to the team that the deployment is succeeded, so they are aware, like, okay, now we have to be careful, like post deployment, if there is any I would say change in the performance, so they'll be, so it would be very evident, like due to the recent deployment this particular alerts are triggering more. So that is like how we do. Or sometimes if the deployment is going on, we understand, okay, these resource utilization is spiking up, so we know because the deployment is going on, so we are aware, and accordingly we manage the performance matrix or the logs of our application, and we act upon the alerts. Audit trail for application events and API calls. So the API calls, because the components inside the Kubernetes are calling APIs, that could be deployment, that could be stateful set, that could be daemon set, or that could be deployment controller or replica controller. So all these events which are calling inside the cluster or outside the cluster, they are being, I would say, audited. So we aware in like for the application events, how they are communicating. So we can audit the trail, like how the components are interacting or communicating with each other. Prometheus matrix. When we see the matrix, we are referring to a number that is regarding the resource. If the resource hitting a particular limit, if it is below the threshold that is acceptable, if it is exceeding the threshold, we need to act upon the the alert. So that is the Prometheus is actually collecting the matrix of the application workload, and so it is giving us um, the the resource utilization view, and this is being actually collected by a node exporter is one of the I would say daemon set resource, which is responsible for collecting the metric and sending it to the Prometheus. And if we are like interested in the logs, uh, like we collect logs also for the logs um, that is collected by we have open search, one of the service. And so the we are scraping the logs to the endpoint of open search through fluent bit. So this is the fluent bit is collecting the logs and is collecting the logs and scraping it to the this endpoint, and and then We can visualize it through Kibana or through we have this Grafana. So it depends. Parameter overrides for overriding Helm parameters in the Git. So the parameters overriding for overriding Helm parameters in the Git. So in the Git repository, we are changing the parameters, right? So if we change the parameter, the value of the parameter in the Git, that is, we want this certain scaling count in our workload, then it will do that. So this is all the features of the Argo CD. Now the deployment is status, and this is adoption. Okay, so this is all about Argo CD. We have understood the features of Argo CD. We have understood the architecture of the Argo CD and also how it works and why we are using Argo CD and what is Argo CD. So we got all the aspects of the Argo CD. This is all about Argo CD.